Mrs. Feiler, may I have roll call, please?
Mr. Larkin.
Here.
Mr. Painter.
Here.
Mr. Redder.
Here.
Mrs. Reese.
Here.
Mrs. Riley.
Here.
Mrs. Taylor.
Here.
Mrs. Waxler. Mr. Zepos.
Here.
Mrs. Zilkowski. Here. 8 in attendance.
Welcome, everyone. The upcoming meetings are in your agenda and on the sideboard. Is there anyone who has a public comment tonight? Could you please step to the microphone and provide your name and address for us?
My name is Rita Ditsky and I live on Sturbridge Drive. I just have one question. I know you won't answer me, but I have a question. How long are you going to hold the tennis courts hostage? Those tennis courts are horrific, the way they look. Inner city, New York, Philadelphia, Reading. Nobody has tennis courts that look like that. Mr. Johnson and Mr. Toon were probably turning over in their grave. That's a black eye on you to have those tennis courts like that. And the other thing I want to say is I was at a lacrosse game a few weeks ago, and there were two little boys just sliding in between the locked gates, in and out, and playing on the tennis courts. When something happens to him, then what? Or something happens to them, then what?
Thank you. I do know that we voted to go out to bid on the tennis courts in March 25th, I believe. So we are getting bids to move forward with that project.
But this is still here.
Bill Murray, 320 South Park Road, page 5, number 17. We're going to approve a scope of work for the train HVAC in the amount of $914,000. And I was wondering if it's about time, if we haven't already spent the $480,000 that's been sitting in the bank account for 10 years, earning the wrong kind of interest, and if we're finally going to spend that, maybe to pay it and get it out of the account if we haven't already. As expected, there'd be no answer. And then I just would like to make a comment for some of the new board members, just a factual correction that seems to be floating around regarding the right to know being listed on these agendas. Anybody who was around back in the day when that was implemented knows the sole intention of that was to limit public participation in the meetings and in the process. It's a fact. And if people want evidence of the facts, I'll be glad to do my research and provide you with emails from former board members telling me exactly that's why it was in there. So what I want to say to you is this. Those same people that are telling you all these stories about all this fairy tale-ness of what this is about, you should not put any faith in what they say to you at all, because I'll be able to prove to you that they're nothing but lies regarding this. Absolute lies. The purpose of doing this serves no other purpose than to limit people participating in the process, as does not answering the call. That does nothing but limit the process for people to be involved in. The last thing I'll say to you is, if a resident asks the board for something, or any board member for something, and they refused it, or they're told to submit a right to know request, then on your list it should say the person causing it is the school district by not simply answering it. Because if you provide the answer, it means the person was entitled to it anyhow. So they should have been able to get it by asking for it, not asking for a right to know request. So think about what you're doing, and just don't be misled by past people that are telling you fiction, because that's what it is. And that's just a fact. I ask you to be fair about it. It's something that should have never been put out. And if you do your homework, you'll find out the recording of the minutes that was on there as part of the normal agenda. That was put there for the same purpose. It was one night, they asked if somebody was recording, and I raised my hand and said, I am. And it turned into this fishing that people didn't, well, we can't do that. They were put in for two reasons, and that was to limit me personally, and to limit the rest of the people from being included in the process. So no matter what else you were said, that's the facts. Thanks.
Anyone else?
I was
I'm Lisa Stone. I live at Florida Avenue. I was at the 2 Wednesday meetings about the tennis courts and the bids, and I understand that they did go out. Do you have any idea how long it's going to take for them to come back? I thought it was going to start this summer, and I've been waiting for the trucks to come to start doing everything, and I don't know.
Mobilization will be probably early August.
That's when they'll start doing the tennis courts.
Correct.
Thanks.
Is there anyone else?
For 2.5 years, myself and a group of
Could you state your name back?
Kim Jen, Old Mill Road. For 2.5 years, myself and a group of concerned parents and grandparents have been working to improve school safety and security at the Hills building. We did this on our own because we noticed problems, and in light of multiple recent mass shootings, we thought this was an important issue to take care of. We kept it quiet because we didn't want to publicize that the school had security flaws. We have met multiple times with administrators over these past 2.5 years. And while some improvements have been made, there are still many that have to be attended to, and we are more than happy to discuss these in great detail. However, since I know I only have 3 minutes to speak, I will just sum it up by saying that there is still much room for improvement. There is much more to be done. Despite this fact, it seems that the school board has not taken an active role in improving school security. Let me provide one example of many. Recently, as a result of hesitation on part of school administrators regarding logistical issues, the cutoff for a WAIF grant that would have paid software for panic buttons and security cameras at the Hills. I'll get 15 more seconds for that. We could have had panic buttons and all the missing security cameras at the Hills up and running by the time the school started again in the fall and completely paid for by a WAIF grant. In our opinion, this is one example that this issue is not a priority of the school board. And it seems that said board members may be somewhat ill-informed as to the current state of school security. And I say all this in light of the amount of time and money that has been spent in trying to protect an award-winning grass field. Is that what Wyomissing is about? Honestly, what is the priority? The fence? Is nothing else going to get done until this fence is built? Tennis courts that look like a bombed-out street corner in Syria, a broken HVAC system, restoring the dozens of cuts to education made over the past 3 years, a much-needed STEM program, and above all, making sure that we have everything we need to secure our schools and keep our kids and staff safe. Is this what Wyomissing has become? Award-winning grass over award-winning students? Because certainly in the past few years, we have slipped in our academic rankings, our course offerings, and our extracurricular activities. Are we going to be a school that cares more about the safety of its children, less about the safety of its children, and instead protect a sports field? The grass field needs no protecting. The police records indicate no threat of any kind of this grass field. The biggest threat to it is the sinkholes underneath it and the sports teams playing on it. You have state-of-the-art security cameras monitoring the field. I implore you to look at your short time on this school board as an opportunity to truly do something substantive and important for the students at this school. Please use your time, your effort, fundraising dollars and tax dollars to make improvements to school security, which is above and beyond the most important thing here. Children are more important than blades of grass. Don't forget that you are running an educational system and not a sports complex. Please contact me if you'd like to meet with me or anyone in our group to get more detail on what we've worked on in the last 2.5 years with administration to get improved school security and what else must be done. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to make a public comment tonight? We'll do routine approvals. It is recommended that the Board of School Directors approve the following minutes. May 9th, 2016, business meeting with committee reports. May 23rd, 2016, business meetings. May I have a motion, please? Second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Mrs. Filer, may I have roll call, please?
Mrs. Zolkowski. Mrs. Larkin.
Yes.
Mr. Painter.
Yes.
Mr. Redmond.
Yes.
Mrs. Reese.
Yes.
Mrs. Riley.
Yes.
Mrs. Taylor. Yes. Mr. Zeppos.
Yes.
8 yes.
It is is recommended that the Board of School Directors accept the treasurer's report. May I have a motion, please? Second. Is there any discussion? Mrs. Feiler, may I have a roll call, please?
Mrs. Morgan? Yes. Mr. Painter?
Yes.
Mr. Redmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Reese? Yes. Mrs. Riley?
Yes.
Mrs. Taylor? Yes. Mr. Zeppos?
Yes.
Mrs. Bilkowski? Yes. 8 yes.
It is recommended the Board of School Directors approve payment of bills for the month of May 2016 as listed in the financial packet 1 through 5. May I have a motion, please? Second. Any discussion? May I have a roll call, please, Mrs. Weiler?
Mr. Painter?
Yes.
Mr. Redmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Reese? Yes. Mrs. Riley?
Yes.
Mrs. Taylor? Yes. Mr. Zeppos?
Yes.
Mrs. Bilkowski? Yes. Mrs. Morgan? Yes. 8 yes.
Thank you.
Under Curriculum and Technology, it is recommended that the Board of School Directors approve the following curriculum and technology items. There is one.
So moved.
Second? It's okay. Is there any discussion? Mrs. Feiler, may I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Redmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Reese?
Yes.
Mrs. Riley?
Yes.
Mrs. Taylor? Yes. Mr. Zeppos?
Yes.
Mrs. Bilkowski? Yes. Mrs. Morgan? Yes. Mr. Painter?
Yes.
8 yes.
Thank you.
Under Finance and Facilities, it is recommended that the Board of School Directors approve the following finance and facility items numbered 1 through 18.
Okay, I've had a request to pull 7 and 17, 18. 7 and 18, yes, okay. So, may I have a motion for items, can I just list the items? Except for, I'll just call out the numbers, okay? May I please have a motion for items 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17.
So moved.
Second? Is there discussion? We're gonna discuss that now. Right? No. Right, discuss. 17 is so on, so we discuss it now.
Right. There's an update.
Sheriff Snyder,
The HVAC project at junior senior high school. When we first spoke about this in facilities committee, the bids came in between $700,000 and $800,000. When we were going through the, you can jump in at any time, Mr. Caffin.
Okay, the preliminary estimates, before we went to actually have contractors on site, were between 7 and 800,000. Once we started digging in after the commitment letter was signed, we had contractors, multiple contractors on site to get multiple bids, even though we're working under the TCPN contract. We found that there was a few items that made the price go up by about 130,000. I'll start going through them. The transformer relocation, it's in the back of the chiller room. Basically, if we were to use that space for potentially a walk-in freezer or some other type of storage, that piece of machinery will have to be relocated to a sidewall to really free up the middle of the square footage. So that's one. 2, replacement and relocation of the chiller pumps. That's another piece of equipment in that room that would also need to be relocated to accommodate a freezer, dry storage, something that would really help the operations for the food service department. They're tight on storage as it is, and this would really improve their operations. The paving of the cooling tower. The cooling tower was, during the initial estimates, we had a couple visions for what would work best, and when we started digging in, that cooling tower that sits outside the food service office, underneath it is a 20-foot pit. So being able to modify that and fill in the pit, compact it properly, pave it over, it was more money than we initially estimated once we started doing surveys and things of that nature. The domestic hot water upgrade, this was a component that was VE'd out of the project, that was taken out of the project in the 2012 boiler room project. Basically, it's a $6,500 upgrade that will make our boilers smarter. In layman's terms, we have 2 boilers that run a good portion of the building. It would be installing an isolation valve and increase energy efficiency. Right now, they're both running in tandem. This will make them smarter and only run when they need to run. So this is something that we looked at as an opportunity to gain some energy savings for a low cost. And then the junior senior high school controls integration. I spoke about this at, I think, the last 4 committee meetings. After the commitment letter and we started really digging into the controls, we are going to be upgrading, not only eliminating the cooling tower, getting a new chiller, getting controls to that chiller, getting controls to the heating plant. Those are your backbones of the system. This will then bring in the remainder of the building. Now, that doesn't mean we're replacing equipment, running new wire. What it means is we're going to take the old NRG, Barber Coleman, pneumatics, controls that are existing and overlay them within our trained system, which will then give us the ability to control the rest of the building as energy efficient as possible. I'm not going to say the older equipment's going to gain you energy savings, but we're going to have control over equipment we've had sporadic control over basically my entire time here. So this will definitely upgrade the controls and give us a little bit more versatility, and it's also going to hold us over till the next project that incorporates the rest of the building. So I'd be willing to take any questions on that, and Mark has some.
Well, since we posted the revised agenda, the price had changed again. So Train came back to us with $913,000, which isn't much of a difference. But once again, with the Hills project, we were able to prepay that at a discount. The price would come in at $899,800 if we would prepay. $899,800. And the bigger question to ask is whether or not we want to go with the demolition of the cooling tower, which was actually in the major, if you remember, there was those 4 options, A through D. Scope C had demolition of the actual cooling tower, filling in the pit and putting basically a parking area and a place for a dumpster there. If we were to not demo that tower right now, it'd be at a savings of about $55,000 that would come off that price. So the tower would stand as it is now, would be basically shuttered. We remove the equipment from it.
Yeah, we basically encapsulated that way nobody could get on top, because basically if you get on the top, it's a straight 20-foot down. So we'd lock it up tight. We'd still have some electrical components in there, but for the most part it'd be abandoned in place.
I just do have one question.
Yeah.
Are we going to have to do that eventually anyway?
Yes, we would demo it at some point, but it just depends how you want to pay for this project. If we're using the capital reserve for this, or if we want to go, I know. So if we use the capital reserve now and don't demo the building, that gives us some more, basically we're buying some more time until we do the larger project when, we're going to have to probably go out for a bond or some sort of note to finance that.
So it's not going to hurt us if we don't do it now, it's not going to increase our back-end cost by not doing it.
Correct. The structure is sound. It's the components in the structure that we're looking to replace. So if we would remove the components and just shutter the cooling tower as it is, there would be no issue with the structure of the actual building. Yeah.
Instead of saying it was off energy efficiency, there's just nothing there, and instead of just having just a parking area, it should be the tower there, so it's shut.
Correct. Of all the items, option C, the base project, and then the items that Mr. Cafancelli just reviewed, it's the basically only item that we could pull out that has no real impact to the project at all.
It's not mission critical.
Yeah.
When we talked about this earlier today, I asked about the mission critical component of it, that were we being forced to demo this, did we have to do it now, or could this be tagged on later? And when we talked about this, as Mike said, we were just going to use it for parking. And I said, well, it's not mission critical to the energy savings that this project's going to do, and it could be done later, much like your question, if we would choose to do that at a later time.
You have a recommendation, administration?
Yeah.
Mrs.
Okay.
George has a
Yeah.
question.
No, that's it. I know one of our previous meetings, we were talking about storage.
Okay, I know at one of our previous meetings, we were talking about the food service, and we have storage right now over at the field house. Could this tower be turned into some sort of storage facility, being that it's near the cafeteria, perhaps some of the refrigeration, as opposed to going across the street? It does match the relatively the architecture of the buildings with the red brick. Have we looked into anything like that?
We did look at it. From a cost-effective perspective, it's going to be easier to put in the chiller room just because of that 20-foot pit that's underneath that cooling tower. So you would need to do quite a bit of construction, demolition, and then reconstruction to get something in there. We looked at it, but the numbers just didn't work.
So am I correct in understanding that if we don't demo the tower and we save that $55,000, we can then use the capital reserves? If we do demo the tower, then we would be considering getting a loan instead.
That depends. Yeah, no, we can pay for this entire project as is at $913,000 or the $899 if we choose to prepay it out of capital reserve. We also have the maintenance shed. We also approved to replace the curtain wall in the gym, all out of capital reserve. So that's the only way we can renew the fund is if we have fund balance at the end of the year we put into it. So it's like your savings account at home. So if we're going to do all these projects out here, we're left with the remainder to do anything if there's an emergency that crops up or any of the repairs that are needed. So we can do the whole project. To answer your question, we can do the whole project out of capital reserve. But we could also look at other ways if needed. Well,
I mean, my final question is there a recommendation from you, Mark, or you, Mike, as far as whether it makes sense to get demolition now or wait until later on? Is there pluses, minuses in that decision?
You're going to be mobilizing either way. If when we have a larger project, there's going to be people on. It all depends how long that larger project is down the road. If it's 5 years, it could be more. Construction costs could go up. Other than that, abandoning in place at the moment won't really be a bad thing. It's just how long, the longer we wait, the more money it could cost.
I guess I'll just speak, this is my thought on that. I think it makes sense to do it now if we're doing our project. If we have the funds in capital reserve, take care of it, my opinion. So I would just say, let's just get that scope of work done now that we envision it. Then it's down. If we don't do that, you're right, cost may increase. Maybe something happens over there from a structural perspective we just didn't see or envision. Now we're spending more money on that thing to deal with it already for the main project. Just my thought.
Mark, what is our capital reserve?
$2.6 million.
I'm actually thinking the opposite of you though, Scott. Like, if we don't have to spend 55 now, why do we spend it? But it's just another perspective.
I think that's a valid point. I mean, I know with construction, if you got people out there to already do it, it could be the risk more cost effective. My concern is, do we really look at all the options with that tower? I mean, nothing we can do with it at all, filling it, as opposed to tearing it down, but can we?
There's very limited storage space. It's mostly pumps and a large fan unit, and the majority of the building is a 20-foot pit. And yeah, we looked at it in multiple different directions, and it could solve two things. We'll be able to bring over a recycling dumpster that we don't have over there, which will help operations, and we'll gain 2 more parking spots, 2 to 3 more parking spots for the food service workers. That if anybody drives down back there, it's tight. So we looked at that as the biggest benefit over the other options.
I'm sorry, I was just asking the administration to reiterate whether or not they recommend taking the tower down now. And Mr. Boyer was saying that you were thinking to wait.
Yes, the recommendation actually would be to wait to take it down and include it in the larger scope of the project when we go for the full renovation project. I mean, you make a great point.
For you, Mark, but I'd like to,
Shocked.
like from a financial perspective.
$55,000 is quite a, yes, that's right.
Mike, you okay with that from your perspective?
As long as we come back to it, because I'm just not a,
Yeah, and
I'm just not a
You
big,
never know, right?
no, we, you know,
and I know we're gonna come back to it, but that's,
Okay.
I'm not a big proponent of abandoning things in place, but right now, the dollars and cents, if we could save 55,000, we could save 55,000, so.
if it wasn't structurally sound, it would be a different recommendation, but because right now there's physically nothing wrong with the brick building. You know, 1, 2, 3 more years, and
Right.
As long as
A couple
we-
more space aren't gonna make a big difference. The operational benefits you're getting from taking it down don't outweigh the fact that
Correct.
you can reserve that money for another couple of years.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, so just to close this discussion up, we are gonna pull the tearing down of the water cooling tower out of the project, okay? So when we vote tonight, we'll be voting on the project minus that item, okay? And then we will discuss the financing of it in August during finance, okay? Is everyone clear on what we're voting on? Okay, so we are going to now do a roll call for all those items under finance minus numbers 7 and 18, okay? So may I have a motion, we did motions, so can I roll call please, Mrs. Swyler?
Mrs. Reese? Yes. Mrs. Riley?
Yes.
Mrs. Taylor? Yes. Mr. Zeppos?
Yes.
Mrs. Bilkowski? Yes. Mrs. Larkin? Yes. Mr. Painter?
Yes.
Mr. Reddick?
Yes.
8 yes.
May I have a motion for item number 7, please?
Motion.
Second? Did you want to, you just need to let us know why you're abstaining.
So I'm gonna abstain from that item due to my professional relationship with the Karen Foundation as an employee in the SAP program. So I'm just not gonna vote on that item.
Is there any other discussion? May I have roll call, please?
Mr. Zeppos?
Yes.
Mrs. Bilkowski? Yes. Mrs. Larkin? Yes. Mr. Painter?
Yes.
Mr. Reddick?
Yes.
Mrs. Reese?
Yes.
Mrs. Riley?
Yes.
7 yes, 1 abstain.
Okay, so the last item we have under finance and facility is item number 18. Motion, please. May I have a second? Is there any discussion? I know there were some questions raised over the weekend when the board packet came out, so I think Mr. Caponcelli might be able to address some of those questions tonight.
Thank you, Mrs. Riley. Okay, over the weekend, there was some questions to the soundness of the football field. So I'm gonna try to give you a brief history of where we started back in 2012 and bring you to where you are now. So 2012, the district decided to contract SSM to do a geotechnical study of the football field. This was brought on by the first sinkhole that was found on the football field over towards the visitor bleachers. It'll be up in 1 second. Okay, so right down in this general area was the first sinkhole in 2012, right in there. So, the SSM did a full geotechnical study, and once the results came back, it showed we had two different issues. One was being, we had a sanitary sewer line and also a drainage line that crossed the field, basically right down the 50-yard line, comes out of here, goes up towards Wyoming, and then we had a sanitary sewer line that came down straight past the home bleachers out towards Girard. Sorry, I'm trying to hit both, George. Yeah, so right down Girard. Those pipes were identified as terracotta pipe, and they were in there probably since the early 50s, maybe earlier, and they have been compromised. So the recommendation from SSM was that repair those, and also any known sinkholes to do something called pressure grouting. Pressure grouting is a type of flowable fill that basically gets down in there and tries to bridge that gap between the surface and the subsurface. So those two were done in 2012, 2013, large project. There were also other sinkholes identified in this area by the home bleachers. And after the study, they had 4 sections that they listed as of concern. Down here, basically in this corner, this is like section A, section B, section C, and section D was basically on the 50-yard line. So those were areas of concern. So what we did is we focused on that back in 2013, pressure grouted a majority of the larger concern areas. We decided to put a cap on the pressure grouting because at that time the school district moved away from the feasibility of a synthetic turf that was being looked at for the football field. If we were to put in synthetic turf, we would have wanted to pressure grout the most of or all of the concerned area to put downfield. Since that was no longer the plan of the district, we moved away from that and capped the pressure grouting. And then in 2014, we took a look at the tennis courts. I think that was one of my first projects when I got here. We did some additional subsurface evaluations on the tennis courts to look for any subsurface issues. They came back negative to, the soils all came back positive, we didn't have any sinkholes. It was good to go. That's why we ended up moving forward with the tennis court project. 2015, 16, the most recent sinkhole, which many of us know about, is right down here, but on the 45-yard line of the visitors' bleachers. That was when we found the depression. We called SSM, had them out on site initially, asked for their recommendation. They recommended us open the hole up, find out what we're dealing with. When we opened the hole up, we found a drainage box, basically part of the irrigation box. That's one of the junction points, and one of the pipes were compromised on the right-hand side, and that created the depression. So what we did, the recommendation from SSM was to remove the box, replace the pipe, put flowable fill in to bridge that gap, and reinstall the box. And that's what we did most recently. I've also been asked, how does this survey affect the fence? For the most part, the fence runs from here all the way around to basically the end of the tennis courts here. Everything north of the 50-yard line is bedrock. That was identified in the SSM survey. So you have bedrock up here, so we don't really have any worries of sinkholes past the 50-yard line to the north. Now down in here's another story. These are a couple, the highlighted areas I told you, basically right inside, they go from the end zone to the 40, same thing on this side, are areas of concern. Now those areas were pressure grouted. And to date, we have not had any additional sinkholes in those areas. With the exception of here, but that was caused by a drainage box, and that was not an area that was pressure grounded. That was closer to the 50-yard line. And one more point, I'm sorry. The fence will come straight down through the corner of the tennis courts to the concession stand and go through one of the areas of concern. But one thing we gotta keep in mind is the fence pillars, their foundation is about 3 feet. So we're not even gonna get to the frost line. But that is something that we will be mindful of during construction to make sure we're keeping that in check and making any evaluations that is needed. Hope I covered everything. It was a lot of information quickly. I'm open to questions and feedback. Yes, sir.
You said you did a geo study of the field.
Yes.
How far did the geo study go? Did it go to the sidewalks, and that's why you have this data?
Yes, it went.
Did it go up further, or did we just focus within the track, or did we focus all the way to the sidewalks?
I'll kind of outline it. It definitely got the entire football field, and it got about halfway through the tennis courts up here and down in here under the visitor bleachers, because we concentrated my predecessor concentrated his efforts down towards where the known sinkhole was, and also down here where we had a structure. So it doesn't, to answer your question, it does not go all the way to the road.
Mr. Capicelli, so
Yes.
the geo study did not look at all of the areas that the fence is going to be installed?
It covered a majority. Like I said, anything above the 50-yard line is all bedrock, so really this upper half of the fence is fine. And it did get down here where the fence is between the parking lot and the stadium. And then down here, didn't get down here where this gate is. So if that helps you.
So that study was done by a different board, obviously, because that was a few years ago. Is it possible for current board members to get copies or some kind of report from SSM to review?
Are you talking an updated report or the 2012 study?
Either.
Either, yes, that's possible.
Okay.
A new report would have to be, that I would have to get a directive from the board to go out for a new study, and there would be costs associated with that.
What's the approximate cost?
I couldn't tell you that. Mark might have it.
The study in 2012 cost $41,000 just for the study.
Just to clarify, when you use the word cap, you capped the grouting back in, was that 2012 or 13, in the center of the field? When you say cap the grouting, that means you simply stopped. It wasn't a completed project, correct? It was just that it was time to stop the project. It was not completed.
The recommendation at the time was when the board moved away from a synthetic option and was going to stay with natural grass. It was not necessary to keep moving. I think the board recommended that fact.
To stop. It wasn't completed. Right.
Yes,
Thank
it was
you.
not completed.
Sorry. So knowing that part of the fence is gonna be in the danger zone, so to speak, how does that affect any insurance claims that may be filed later? Like if we build the fence and somehow we knew it was a weaker area of the field and then something happens, will our insurance still cover any damages, or is that an extra cost to the district?
I'll defer that to Mr. Boyd.
With the insurance, when we had the latest depression, there was no structural damage done to anything. So it just happens when Mr. Capicelli told me about the depression, our insurance broker was in the office with me having a conversation. And I ran it by him and he was like, is there structural damage? And the answer was no. So because there's area of potential concern on the lower half of the football field, it was only if there's structural damage occurs if a sinkhole does open up or a depression occurs where some sort of structural damage to the property happens, not the land depressing. Just if like it would break sidewalk or it would do structural damage to a building, which
The bleachers would be a good example of that.
Yeah.
If it would have affected the bleachers, that could have been a claim.
That would be something we would then talk to the insurance. I don't think it would affect any potential future claims because we built a fence in what could be a potential area of concern at some point.
And if I could add on to that, the potential area of concern, the main areas was inside the track. It did move its way out, but that was less of a concern. It's different levels of red on the site survey, and I'd be happy to show you that.
Thanks, Terry. No, I'm good.
Okay.
And you know, my concern with asking the question at the beginning of the geo study, was it within the track or out, is really not because of the fence, it's more the safety, you know, of our students on that sidewalk, or, I mean, do we have terracotta going under the streets there, or anything like that? I mean, it's not about is the fence gonna go, it's just more curiosity. Is there,
Are you saying does terracotta go all the way out to the street?
yeah, or any of that piping that we talked about?
That's all been replaced.
That's all been replaced?
That was replaced in 2012 during the remediation process. So when we did the pressure grouting, we removed all the soil, the sod, replaced the piping that we had to, the terracotta that went east and the other that went north. We found that that was compromised in multiple locations and was recommended by SSM that it was a contributing factor to some of our issues.
Plus the terracotta that's underneath the tennis courts is being replaced in this project, in the tennis court project right now as well.
Absolutely, that's a full reno, so you'll have new drainage, new retaining wall, everything.
Okay, so just so I know I understand this, if you build a house in a floodplain, and it's never flooded before, but you know it's in a floodplain or a low-lying area, and the potential for flood is there, when the flood occurs, sometimes insurance does not cover it unless you have specific extra insurance. So I just want to make sure this isn't a similar type of situation where, you know, we built the fence and then a sinkhole develops and one of the pillars collapses, and it's going to be $15,000 to fix the pillar. Are we going to be held responsible for that because we built on what we knew was a structurally weaker area?
Once our deductible is met, then we'll go forward with the claim. But as far as, I mean, I will double check with the insurance company, but they be the same broker since 2000. Well, before 2012, I don't know the exact date, so they know, they're already advised of the area. I mean, when I talked to him, meaning our broker, he knew about the prior sinkholes, so I will double check with him and get the answer.
Wouldn't that be the same thing if something happens with the tennis courts? I mean, we're putting tennis courts on this field, and we're assuming that the insurance would cover any claims, so I'm not sure what the difference would be by putting a fence around the more stable part of the field, insurance covering that as well, because, you know, our tennis courts are covered.
I think if I understand correctly, it's because that part is bedrock, and we know bedrock is really sound.
No, not the tennis courts, kind of
The other side?
Yeah, to the left of the.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, thank you, because I didn't understand that, so, okay, gotcha.
But you did say the tennis courts were A-okay and identified no issues. It's on the football field.
There was a study done. There's no guarantees. You know, they bored holes, they did ground penetrating radar, they did subsurface testing, things like that. But from their results of that study for the tennis courts, it came back as not a concern at this issue. But there's no way to predict where the next sinkhole is going to be.
Is there any further discussion on this item? Can I ask one question or not? Just based on the conversation that I
No,
can
I'm
ask
sorry.
one question?
No.
How many all I want to know is how many square feet were in the original 2013 How many square feet were disturbed? That's all, the only question I want to ask.
I'll ask it. In the original 2013 sinkhole, the big one, how many square feet were displaced or filled in?
You're just talking about the original? The original sinkhole or the remediation process that did a majority of the field.
The remediation process.
I don't have the square footage, but I could get it for you. It's roughly 50 yards by the width of the stadium, but I can do that math. Apologize.
May I have a motion for item 18 on the Finance and Facilities agenda, please?
Can I make a final comment before we vote? Sure, right? The simple fact is that most of us on this board are not actually completely educated about the 2012 field study, complete remediations, and the overall condition of the football field. Even based tonight, there's some information getting back to us about insurance liability, as well as the entire size of that one massive remediation center field. I can admit that my frame of reference stems from secondhand knowledge, and I don't feel comfortable making decisions based on that. Knowing that last month's sinkhole was a recurrence somewhat near a previously remediated one, and having heard that the remediation back in 2013 cost about $500,000 and was a stop order, not a completion, which is a big difference, I think it might be best practice and in the district's best interests and the community's to be fully formed about our property, vet this issue, read the information, and then proceed with a vote.
I'll just remind everyone, we're simply requesting we're just giving the administration permission to go out to bid. We still would have to accept a bid. So this is giving us an understanding of the cost of the project once it goes out to bid. So that is what we were voting on today, okay? So if there's no further discussion, can I have a roll call, please, Mrs. Seiler?
Mrs. Bilkowski? Yes. Mrs. Larkin? Nope. Mr. Painter? Mr. Redmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Reese? Yes. Mrs. Riley?
Yes.
Mrs. Taylor? Mr. Zeppos?
Yes.
That's 5 yes, 3 no.
We're on.
Moving on to personnel and policy, it is recommended that the Board of School Directors approve the following personnel and policy items numbered 1 through 10.
May I have a motion, please? Second? Is there any discussion? May I have a roll call, please, Mrs. Seiler?
Mrs. Riley?
Yes.
Mrs. Taylor?
Yes.
Mr. Zeppos?
Yes.
Mrs. Bilkowski? Yes. Mrs. Larkin? Yes. Mr. Painter?
Yes.
Mr. Redmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Reese? Yes. 8 yes.
On behalf of the board, I would just like to thank Mr. Murray, Mr. Lutz, and Mrs. Winslow for their dedication and commitment to the district. We wish them much success in the future. Did you have anything?
And if I can add, Steve Murray has been our assistant principal at the high school for the past 2.5 years, and he's not here this evening because ironically, Governor Mifflin is approving him as their high school principal this evening, so he's going to be leaving us. It's bittersweet. We're happy to see him. When you become an assistant principal, you hope one day to fly as a principal, and so it is bittersweet to see him go. He's done remarkable work up at the high school, so we will miss him, but we certainly congratulate him with the opportunity that has come before him that he's accepting tonight. So he's not here this evening. We would say this in person, but he's over at Mifflin this evening. So they're getting a good administrator to leave their high school. We trained him, and so they're going to have a very good high school principal over at Mifflin, but we do wish him well. And I echo Mrs. Riley's comments about Mr. Lutz, and Ms. Winslow also is serving the Wyomissing area in their capacity in the district.
I'd like to also draw attention to 4A and congratulate Mrs. Waller on getting her assistant superintendent effective July 1st. So congratulations, I know that was a lot of hard work and you were doing a lot of hard work for the district too this year. You got a lot done and it was very impressive how quickly you got your work done for your superintendent. Okay, thank you. Is there any old business? Is there any new business?
Mine can qualify probably as both. I just want to bring up our practice of publishing right to knows on the monthly agenda. It was, I brought it up in an email to the board back in May and must have gotten lost in the shuffle. So this policy was adopted before all of us, but it has come up many times with our current board. I think I may actually hold the record for the most right to knows filed with the school district, but regardless, I'd like to propose in public that we add this policy as one of importance to review and to also suspend the practice of publishing until we have the opportunity to do so properly. I'd rather err on the side of caution in this regard in case some information that we're disclosing is maybe not appropriate. I'm not looking for discussion this evening. I'm just proposing in public and hoping that maybe we can get this on the dockets in future months to discuss.
The policy that addresses right to know is 006 in meetings, and what it does is there isn't a policy per se. There's a public meeting policy that is pretty much the right to know law, as in open office records. We can look at this in committee in August.
But I don't know that our policy says we publish them on the agenda.
Policy just says it's included as part of the agenda.
Okay.
That's the only reference. But we can discuss it in policy, absolutely.
Any updates from organizations, WAEA, AFSCME, WAIF, PTA? Okay, if there's no further business, may I please have a motion to adjourn? Second? All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Okay, meeting is adjourned.